So here's the thing. I know I don't have a regular audience because I don't post very often. The reason I don't post very often is because I hate editing. Um, so that said, I'm going to start posting more often, but they're going to be live videos. If my followers, and I'm over 500 at this point, want me to schedule these lives, you're going to have to let me know. I'm thinking like Friday mornings or Monday mornings. I am somewhat of a Monday person, not Monday mornings, Tuesday mornings. I'm somewhat of a morning person. So yeah, that said, um, I've been dancing around this topic for 18 years. Uh, when I started homeschooling, well, okay, let's go back before that. Let's just tell the whole thing. Um, when I remember being in bed with my newborn son, um, in the midst of postpartum depression. And my husband came home and said, "Hey, I was talking to these people at my job and they homeschool their kids. We should really consider that." And now when my husband says we, he's usually talking about me. And I cursed him out. Like the things I said to him can't be repeated. Something like, if you think you're gonna make me be barefoot and pregnant, blah, 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 blah. You have another thing coming, Buster. Um, Fast forward 3 years. My son is in 3-year-old preschool. There's 3-year-old preschool, there's 4-year-old preschool, and there's kindergarten. And I put him in a private school. I put him in a Catholic school. I had gone to Catholic schools. And every Friday I would say, "How's Jack doing?" And she'd say, "Oh, Jack's just being Jack." You know, and long story short, um, after like March, I say, "How's Jack doing?" And she says, "We need to talk." Okay, pack up my children, pack up the baby, pack up the Jackson, and I make an appointment and I go and I sit down in a little tiny chair, you know, and she looks at me and she goes, "We think that you should take Jackson home for the rest of the year and put him back in the same 3-year-old preschool next year." And I'm like, "My baby's in preschool and you're trying to leave him back? Why?" And she says, "Well, he doesn't speak." And, Jack's behind me with the baby. They're on the floor. And I'm like, "Who doesn't speak?" Because Jackson didn't shut up. Like at my house, you know what I'm saying? And I'm like, "You got to be kidding me." And like on cue, my son starts yelling, "Jordan, Jordan, take that out your mouth." Because that was his accent. So when he was 3. And the teacher jumps up. She was very tiny. Oh, she was 4'5". She jumps up, hands in the air like she just was witnessed a miracle. Runs around, runs over to him, gets on her knees, gets in his face, and she grabs his little arm. She's like, "You can speak, you can speak." And I'm sitting there like, what the heck am I witnessing? So, like, this was our entry into formal education. So every year I told the teacher, "Jackson has the ability to be selectively mute. He can speak. It's your job to get him to speak in class because I'm not there." And and every year it would be half the year before he would come out of his shell. And then when he finally did come out of his shell, and we lived in New Orleans. We were in upstate New York then. Then we lived in New Orleans for 2 years. He did good in New Orleans, but I had to make the teachers very aware. And then we moved to kind of upstate New York, like just over the Tappan Zee Bridge. And he's in first grade. And I realized 3 months in that everything he's done to this point is an exact replica of what he had done in kindergarten the year before in New Orleans. So I called the conference and I'm like, so this is the same textbook. Everything about what he's learning right now is the exact same as what he did next year. What are we going to do? And she goes, well, we don't want to frustrate the other children. And I said, I don't care. Like, she jumped. Like, I was like, wow. Long story short, this stuff kept happening. And then when my daughter got to kindergarten, it started happening with her in a different way. She's hyper. You have to drug her, drug her, drug her, drug her, drug her. And I'm like, no, no, she's annoying. She's not, distractible. She's a lot, but no, we're and so we decided to homeschool. And I guess I'm ahead of myself because I totally skipped over that first instance of racism. So I I was working somewhere and I just didn't like working, and our house in upstate New York had sold and we no longer needed me to work. And I just felt like I wanted to stay home with my kids and homeschool. And so I got on the net for what the net was then. And I found homeschooling groups in New Orleans. That is where I lived. And I called them. And I had a long, beautiful conversation with a woman. And they met at the big park in New Orleans, and I can't remember the name of it. St. Charles Park, I don't know. And just a beautiful conversation about homeschooling. She gave me all this advice. I got really excited. And she said, so, come on to our next homeschool meetup day, because that's what homeschoolers do. They meet up. And let's meet and let's meet your children and let's, get you started. And I was like, cool. She was like, cool. We were like, cool. And she was like, okay, so this is a car I drive. And, I have I'm brunette and, I got a little tan and, you know, and, you know what? I'll just go ahead and wear pink. And I'm like, cool. I drive a white Grand Voyager and, hell, I'm just brown and I have braids. And silence. Crickets. Crickets. And she goes, I'm going to call you back. Never calls me back. Never calls me back. Never. Went to the park with my kids a couple times when I knew there was homeschool day. Everyone averted their eyes. Nobody spoke to me. And I decided homeschooling wasn't for us. So fast forward, then we had the instance in upstate New York. And then we had the teachers trying to constantly drug my daughter. And at the same time, we had my son being bullied because his name is Jackson, and he was in Jackson Elementary. Children are wild. And my daughter started having night terrors and wasn't sleeping. And my son's light was dimming. I could visually, literally see it. And I said, well, I've got to do something. And at this point, I was involved in a small church plant and was at night prayer study. I said that I was, struggling, and I didn't want to keep my kids in school because I felt like my small children who were barely to my navel were dealing with clinical depression. And another woman said, I homeschool, let's talk. Oh, that's another whole trauma right there. So we talked. And I started homeschooling. But I'm a hyper focuser because I'm the one that's ADHD in this family. And so I read 40 books on homeschooling, how to homeschool styles, learning styles, right brain versus left brain, unschooling, all the way to classical schooling. You name it. I read it, got my mind straight, and with some guidance from her, began homeschooling my kids. And she was like, okay, well, now you need a homeschool community. And so she took me to a couple of homeschool meetings that she attended. And this one meeting, was about math curriculums. Never go to a homeschool meeting about math curriculums. It's like War of the Roses. Because everyone has their favorite math curriculums and they stand by them. And it's just like the elections. Like no one's hearing what the other person is saying. It was just crazy. Anyway, someone asked me, oh, you're new here. What's your story? And I was like, yeah, we're having problems with the schools. And I just feel like, I can't F up my children worse than the schools are. And this woman darn near got in my face, stopped dead in her tracks, looked me directly in my eyes and said, if God didn't tell you you should be here, you should not be here. And I was like, what does that mean? And I feel that it was racism because the vitriol was too much. The vitriol was too much. And what about me makes you think that God didn't tell me to homeschool? Do you know what I'm saying? And then everyone in that whole group treated me like this, like they didn't see me. They were nice to me because my friend bought me and they liked her, but they really treated me really bad. But, in that moment, I said to her, I said, well, maybe I'm dense and all the trouble that I'm having with my kids in school is God telling me to homeschool. So that shut her up. But no one stood up for me. No one backed me up. And I just dealt with that. And then I tried going to that group, had a lot of roller skating days. And so I would take my kids and we would go to these roller skating days and no one would speak to us. Everyone else was welcoming people, la-di-da. Me and my kids would show up. We were roller skating by ourselves. So I just stopped dealing with that group entirely. And I did eventually find, well, not eventually, kind of immediately find a really good group that my children homeschooled with for their entire career. But when you're in it, you don't realize the damage that is happening to you. You don't feel the microaggressions because they're like sandpaper. It takes a while for that to start removing skin. You know what I mean? So, fourth or fifth grade, my son gets in the car after I pick them up because it wasn't a homeschool co-op with a parents' day. It was a what I call a homeschool school, a hybrid. And he's like, we talked about slavery today, and I'm like, and I'm thinking there ain't no black people in that school, so why y'all talking about slavery? And he's like, and the teacher pointed at me and said, if this was this year, then none of you could be Jackson's friend. He would be your slave. And then he said, and next week we're bringing in candy because we're going to play slave and we're going to pay the slaves with candy. And I lost my ever-loving mind. And, I called the woman in charge and I told her that I thought that was offensive to even let children think for a minute that slaves were paid in any way. Because they were not. And she had the lesson pulled, but it didn't help with my popularity at all. Mm-hmm. My children loved it there, and they loved their friends there. And we continued to stay with the program. And when they reached high school, that was when the economy got really bad, and there were two schools, and they became one. And some of the kids at the second school left because it was far, but we traveled to the other school. Being the new Black kid, because my kids weren't from the beginning. Before being the new kid and being the Black kid, things that happened. My daughter never dated the whole time she was there, and the kids took to joking. Jordan is a strong Black woman who don't need no man. I think that is a dangerous joke. Because white people feel, I'm sorry to my white friends, it's the truth, that black women are so strong that they can do it all by themselves. And they don't need a man, and no one should ask them out because they don't need a man. I feel like I'm exercising my demons. Um, you know, my child wasn't worthy of anyone dating her. Now, I heard from parents that their kids had crushes on my children, but never a big enough crush to date them because strong black women don't need a man, and really big black boys scare parents. So yeah, that joke was a lot, and my children giggled it off, and sometimes I freaking giggled it off because you don't. So my son was an angel from the time he walked in there. My son was an angel until he graduated, so he wasn't the problem. There was another black kid there who was a little bit more unpredictable. And so what started happening when my son befriended that kid, everything that kid did, my son was approached about it. That kid did something, someone said, now don't you go doing such and such. That kid brought a computer to a graphic design class and he wanted to use his computer. You know you can't be using that computer. Like everything the other kid did wrong, my son was addressed as if he had been doing it. And he wasn't addressed for anything the white kids did. He was lumped. And that's why when people say, why do black people take on things that happen to other black people as if it's happening to them? Because it is. Because it is. We are lumped. If one black child does something, then all the black children are labeled. So little shit like that happened a lot. A lot. But dang it, I was homeschooling. And I still love that I did it because the little bit the the racism and microaggressions that we experienced along this journey in the years before we started, we'd already experienced 10 times that on the daily. So this was still a relief, but it shouldn't have existed. Um, it got bad when Obama was elected. It got really bad. I'm sitting at a table. I'm in charge of. I'm what they call the drama mama, so I was the lead parent over the drama department. So I'm sitting there taking the payments, for T-shirts and tickets and things. I take my whole day to sit at this table in the lobby, and one of the teachers, the theater teacher, comes up and sits down when there are other teachers there, and I am the only black woman there. And this was when my kids were still in middle school. We're still in the first location. And she says to me, "Are you going to vote for Obama because you're black?" And I was speechless and dumbfounded. Because, first of all, that came out of left field. Second of all, why? And then she's like, "Oh, iron sharpens iron. This is a good conversation." I'm like, "This is not a good conversation. This doesn't feel good. This feels bad. I feel bad. You are targeting me. And this is not iron sharpening iron. You're lead. And you're getting me dirty." You know what I mean? So one of the parents stood up and said, "Well, I'm voting for Obama, and I'm white." And then I finally said, "Are you voting for McCain because you're white?" And I never said who I was voting for because it wasn't anybody's business. I voted for Obama. I did. But it hurt. Like to this day, it still hurts my soul that she did that. Um And there were a lot of little things. If I go to each and every one, I'll be here on a puddle crying, and we don't need that, because when you look back at the racism and understand that I'm raw because of what's going on with the protests and stuff, and we're stuck in COVID, and I have anxiety and I'm OCD, so I'm just raw. So I'm trying to just hit the big moments. I think the most hurtful moment for me was when my children were senior and junior in this program. And I hung around a lot because I'm watching people. I'm kind of funny, like, nah, y'all done mess with my kids enough. So I'm going to make myself a fixture. Y'all go ahead and give me something to do because I'm not going home. You know what I mean? And I'm there doing a potluck, you know, organize a potluck because they're going into Tech Week for a show. Oh, don't get me started on the choices for theater shows. Okay. And this woman who I tolerated, and she was very racist, and I'll tell you why. Because I was carpooling and she wasn't able to go on the trip, but I had her sons, and one of her sons is blind, and the other son was just a beautiful boy, just really sweet. But the blind kid, it's a 3-hour drive, got comfortable, and he started talking. And he's talking about his neighborhood and how his neighborhood's changed. And then he starts saying racist things because he's blind and he don't know what color I am. Oh, shoot. Now, he was talking mostly about Hispanic people, but I could feel the whole car getting tense, and I could feel his brother starting to hyperventilate because it was just a matter of time. So I just said, as a Black person, yada, yada, yada. And the conversation ended. And that kid never spoke to me again. When previous to that, whenever he heard my voice, he would be like, Miss Andrea, because he thought I was a cool person. Close your eyes. I don't sound any race. So, how's woo. So anyway, his mama had 3 boys, and they were at a defiant age. And she came to me and she said, God spoke to me and said I needed to speak to you about finishing off homeschooling because the kids, are pushing 18 and are starting to get defiant. And I just want to finish homeschooling. And you seem to be finishing very strongly. And I was like, yeah, because I know what I was doing. And at that point, I think my son had graduated and he had a scholarship. And my daughter had received her scholarship offers. And I started talking to her. Another woman who I thought was my friend came over and said, no, you don't need to talk to her. You need to talk to this white person. She literally said, one of us. And at that point, I was full steam ahead in becoming a homeschool advocate. I was full steam ahead. I was getting accreditation taken care of. I was doing all the things I needed to do to be where I am right now. Understand this was 6 years ago. Stopped me in my ever-loving tracks. Stopped me. Done. I was done. Because I knew that the people who needed me the most couldn't pay me, and I couldn't afford to do it for free at that point in time. Remember, the economy was bad. And the people who could pay me didn't want me. So, on a positive note, it was a white woman who pulled me back into homeschooling because I had completely left. I graduated my kids and I left. I didn't need that nonsense. I didn't need it at all. Because she saw value in me and in what I was doing and my ideas. And now my homeschool program is 1 year old, and I teach kids who are white and Black. And I have parents who are white and Black, and they appreciate me and they tell me so. So I'm healing. And I teach history, and I don't whitewash anything, and I don't skip anything. And so, The best revenge is success. And I think I'm doing a good job, and I think I'm having success with these kids. And they won't grow up to treat people the way that me and my kids have been treated over the years. But homeschooling has had a really bad racist problem. It still does. I had a woman go completely off on a homeschool site, a local homeschool group, because she wanted to know why black homeschool groups existed and why she kept getting kicked off of them. Long story short is she was getting kicked off them because she would join them and then ask aggressive behind questions like that. Any kind of black group, club, school, college exists because at one point in time, black people, for whatever reason, didn't feel welcome in the mainstream one that exists. So, no, there's not a white only homeschool group or a white homeschool group because you don't need a white homeschool group. The white homeschool group is the homeschool group. The black homeschool group is where black people go after they have been beat up. So, that was my life. Did you like it? I'm gonna keep doing this way. I'm super comfortable talking to the screen, and I hate editing. I mean, if I stammer, I stammer. If I itch my nose, I itch my nose. You know, I'm talking from my heart. Um, if when you finally see this live, you say, "Well, Miss Andrea, can you do this every Wednesday morning, or every Friday morning, or whatever?" I'll consider it. Um, just keep in mind I'm a morning person, and if I see a pattern, then I'll set a schedule. But I know you'll eventually see it. Like most of my followers eventually see my videos. I love you guys. Be kind to each other. Um, White homeschoolers, take care of black homeschoolers. I know you want to. I see a lot of change and I see a lot of love. I'm just so down right now. And I'm very active in the theater community, and I've been seeing theater people who I thought were at the top of their game sadly express how beaten down they were, and because they couldn't hold it anymore because of everything that's going on. And honestly, I've been tiptoeing around this and alluding to this for almost 2 decades at this point, and it just has to be said. I love you guys. Till next time.